Main sponsor.
It was on the 11th of January, the first ever death of coronavirus was reported in China. 4 days before, the first ever death in Sri Lanka was reported. What has been done in our country since then? What has been done globally as well? What should we do in the coming 2 weeks? We have a packed bulletin lined up for you. I'm Tarsha Kumar Singh and this is Primetime News on TV1. But before that, let's take a look at your leading stories in the bulletin tonight. There was a drug consignment seized by Navy yesterday, the largest ever drug haul in the history of the country. It was revealed to the public today. Of course, today's assessment of COVID-19 in the country, and President had a discussion with UNP representatives. What are the reliefs given to the people by the government in these trying times? Medication, is there a cure for COVID-19? What about the Avigan? 5,000 tablets donated by Japan. And is United States of America now the epicenter of COVID-19? The largest haul of drugs seized in the country was revealed to the public today. The value of the drugs seized by the Navy stands at 12.5 billion rupees. The raid was carried out based on the continuous investigations carried out by the Navy intelligence units of Sri Lanka waters. A stateless vessel at 463 nautical miles off the country's southern coast was inspected by the Navy. Upon inspection, 500 kilograms of crystal methamphetamine, commonly known as ice, 500 kilograms of cocaine, 200 packets of babul, and 100 grams of unidentified narcotic pills had been found aboard the vessel.
Recently, the naval intelligence concluded through certain information analysis that possibility exists for some kind of drug transfer in deep seas. We deployed our vessels to engage in patrolling and surveillance in deep seas, and we had to check large number of local fishing trawlers coming from deep seas to Sri Lanka. We checked about 125 such vessels during that time. And at the same time, we got a picture through the UNODC, a satellite picture, and that based on that, we had to change our modus operandi. During her surveillance effort, she detected this particular suspicious vessel on 28th. They realized that this vessel was carrying some illegal drugs.
9 Pakistanis have been arrested when the drugs were seized. This was the third vessel that was raided with the consignment of drugs in the last 2 months. Before this, the Navy was able to arrest 27 people who were smuggling drugs in 2 vessels on the 22nd and the 25th of February. Now, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has decided to set up a refinancing facility to introduce a wide range of concessions for business and individuals affected by COVID-19. Licensed commercial banks, licensed specialized banks, licensed finance companies and specialized leasing companies are eligible to participate in this refinancing facility.
One such relief is to ease the liquidity problems that licensed finance companies and specialized leasing companies face as a result of the sudden withdrawal of public deposits and non-payment of loan installments. According to the central bank, such companies have taken steps to reduce the minimum liquid assets of the corporation to be held in fixed deposits, savings and loans. The deadline for licensed finance companies and specialized leasing companies to meet the minimum capital requirements has been extended. Accordingly, such institutions have been given until the 31st of December this this year to meet the minimum capital requirement of 2 billion rupees and until the 31st of December 2021 to meet the minimum capital requirement of 2.5 billion rupees. The central bank further states that attention has been directed towards formulating a program focused on providing liquidity support to these institutions under the Sri Lanka Deposit Insurance and Liquidity Support Scheme.
When you're looking at the COVID-19 battle, the economic front is extremely important, and the government has given multiple relief measures for people, including providing a moratorium for their loan repayments, including personal loans, vehicle leasing payments, and so on and so forth. And it was a long list. I think what is important is, since the central bank has given a clear guideline to the commercial banks not to take the installments and a series of relief measures, what is important is to, I think the commercial banks also need to adhere and coordinate with the central bank, because I think now at the moment there is a bit of a confusion in the market because some of the loan installments have been deducted, and some banks have proceeded that and some bank has not done the proceedings. It's automatic that there will be a confusion in the market because some banks have adhered to the guideline of the central bank, or maybe some banks have not, or people will be confused basically whether why my loan has been deducted and why someone else's loan has not been deducted. So I think it's very important that the central bank and the commercial banks should work together, and I think the commercial banks also need to pass that relief to people if it has been if it's a guideline from the central bank, since it looks like a guideline from the central bank. So it's also important to looking at the stability of the banking and the financial sector, because it seems like most of the stimulus package and most of the relief measures announced by the government, that is funneling down to the banking sector. The banking sector profitability and the banking sector sustainability comes to a problem. For instance, the non-banking financial sector, most of their loan portfolios is from the micro, small enterprises and self-employed people. In Sri Lanka, about 50-60% of employment is in the informal sector. They are not coming to the formal sector. They are not taking loans from the formal banking sector or the non-banking financial sector. So they are basically working with the chit funds or with loan sharks with an exorbitant rate.
Looking at the overall COVID-19 situation in the country, the total number of COVID-19 patients in the country is at 146, with the new discovery of 3 cases today. At the moment, 126 patients are being treated at the hospitals. The 32 cases reported from the Colombo district is the most number of infected cases that have been reported from a single district. 25 patients have been discovered from the Putlam district, 24 from Kalutara district, 11 from Gampaha, 4 from Kandy and 3 from Ratnapura. According to the Ministry of Health, 1 infected person each have been discovered in Kurunegala, Galle, Batiklo, Badulla and Jaffna districts. 21 people have left the hospital after being recovered. In more news, health officials have taken the necessary steps to quarantine 49 people who have closely associated a corona-infected person from Pannila in Beruala. Here is a report of the situation of the areas where the affected individuals were discovered.
Public Health Inspector in charge of Pannila in Beruala, H.T. Jayanaka, said that the residents who lived close to the first corona-infected patient were sent to quarantine. He added the residents of the area have been informed not to leave their houses and measures have been taken to strengthen the security in the area. 6 out of the total number of patients that were found yesterday are from the Kalutara district. A few infected people were found from the Akrana city that has been placed under lockdown. According to our correspondent, they are the family members of the first infected patient.
His family members, including his wife, has tested positive for coronavirus. Sri Lanka Army is carrying out investigations to identify the locations where the person went and the people he closely associated.
According to the police, the van was destroyed when it was parked at a garage in a Singhalapiti area in Gampala around 10 p.m. yesterday. The van was used to transport the infected patient from the BIA to his house in Akrana. The van had been hired for rent by a resident in Igambo and was owned by a person from Pussallava, Gampala. Upon learning about the van, the Gampala police had informed the medical officer of health of Udapalata, Gampala, about it yesterday. According to our correspondent, the medical officer had recommended that it is not necessary to sanitize the destroyed vehicle since the van was discovered days after the incident. Meanwhile, 10 infected patients were found in Putlam yesterday. One person out of a 6-team group who had arrived from Indonesia and Thailand tested positive for the virus last week, and their relatives were also quarantined. The 10 infected patients were directed to a quarantine center by their family members. Meanwhile, the government took measures to distribute essential goods to residents of the North Tandi area where an infected patient was found.
I am currently standing on the Gamunumavata in North Tandia. People in Gamunumavata in North Tandia and 6 other areas have been prohibited from stepping outside their homes. People in 14 houses has been quarantined as of now. The reason being the discovery of 5 COVID-19 patients 2 days before from this area.
2 children and her husband of the 46-year-old woman have been self-quarantined. The area of Atulugama is still under heavy security and is completely being isolated.
It is from this location where essential goods are being transported to the shutdown Atalugama area. 18 people in total have been infected with coronavirus in the Kalutara district. 5 of them are reported from the Atalugama village. 1,280 people have admitted themselves to be self-quarantined at their homes.
Meanwhile, 200 families were quarantined in the Hattendikoi area. They were quarantined upon learning that a pastor had contracted the virus after distributing food parcels at a religious gathering in the area. Yesterday, we identified 43 relatives and other people who had associated the second person who passed away due to the coronavirus. All 43 of them were sent to the quarantine center in Punani last night. We also had to quarantine the doctors and nurses who were treating the second person who passed away as a result of COVID-19 at the Negombo hospital. A sense of panic was seen among the people after it was revealed that 21 people had been infected with COVID-19. A person from Putlam who had returned from an overseas trip in Thailand and Indonesia had tested positive for the virus day before yesterday. The same night, we directed 68 people who he had contact with to quarantine. Out of these people, we only ran tests on those people who showed any symptoms. However, upon a request made to carry out tests on those who were placed in quarantine at the Zahira Vidyalaya, we did so and identified 10 people who had in fact contracted the virus but did not show any symptoms. The infected person from Putlam had flown in through a Malaysian airline on the 17th of March. 36 other people had also flown in with him. We kindly request them to self-quarantine.
Responding to the request made by the government, 2,913 people have self-quarantined. Under the quarantine and criminal law, strict legal actions will be taken against those who haven't got registered for the quarantine process. It's reported that a few people are still not adhering to the laws of quarantine. We have taken steps to arrest them.
Today we are talking to Dr. Sanjay Sena Nayak, joining us all the way from Canberra, Australia, about the present COVID-19 situation of the country here in Sri Lanka. Doctor, let's get to it straight away. The situation here in Sri Lanka, 2 people have passed away. The infected cases are on the rise. You being a virologist and a specialist on infectious diseases, what is your particular viewpoint of the spread of the virus as of now since the outbreak?
Yes, hi. So Sri Lanka now has 3 recognized clusters in Colombo, Gampaha, Kalutura. And there are a number of people and homes under quarantine. And of course, there's also curfew. So I think Sri Lanka is at a very critical point of the outbreak, and they should go on 2 principles in terms of testing lots of appropriate people and trying to identify those who have the infection so you can isolate them and prevent them from infecting other people. And also, once you've identified someone with infection, finding close contacts who may have been infected but are still not sick and quarantining them. So those things seem to be happening now in Sri Lanka. But of course, Sri Lanka has quite a large population for a small area, so there's quite a bit of population density. So it is very important that these social distancing measures are observed.
Doctor, speaking of being tested positive or negative of the virus, now there are many methods across the country, newly introduced methods. There's a 5-minute method. What do you think, are those methods introduced by various countries, various parts of the world accurate? Or what do you think is, what do you reckon the accurate method is to test for the coronavirus?
So there are a few ways to test for it. The initial way, and the one that at the moment seems the most reliable, is taking the swab of the nasopharynx, so the nasopharyngeal swab, and testing for a genetic component or part of the virus, so doing a PCR test. The original test, though, will take in a laboratory about 5 to 6 hours to process. Since then, there have been the development of a number of faster tests, some also involving the nose swab or nasopharyngeal swab, which but is much quicker, and some which test the blood, so a pinprick to test the blood and see if we've made antibodies to the virus. Now, the only thing with these newer tests as well, because they've been developed very quickly and certainly have undergone some testing, we also have to be wary about how accurate they might be. So certainly they might have to be tested in conjunction with the original test, the nasopharyngeal swab that takes 5 to 6 hours to do. And of course, even the original test, the nasopharyngeal swab that takes 5 or 6 hours to do, that was the first test. So we have nothing to compare that to. And we're assuming that is a very accurate test, but we're still not sure about that. So there, in other words, what I'm saying is we have to keep our minds open to the fact that some of these tests may be very good in some circumstances, but not so accurate in others.
Globally, many countries, the World Health Organization also have advised the people across the globe that the coming 2 to 3 weeks is going to be very dangerous, that we have to be cautious, we have to be vigilant in the coming 2 to 3 days. We saw US President Donald Trump predicting loss of life in his country. Against that backdrop, what should the Sri Lankan government, what are the measures that the Sri Lankan government should take, and especially what the people should do?
I think it is very reasonable to have closed the borders for international travel coming into Sri Lanka. Certainly here in Australia, the vast majority of cases that we've seen, 4,000 cases, have been associated with travel. There's very little community transmission. So I think if you can stop that in Sri Lanka and just focus on any community transmission and clamping down on that, there is a good chance of success. But the Director General of the WHO also has a mantra, which is test, test, test. So I think it's really important to make sure that Sri Lanka has a lot of test kits and they are able to test as they want. So the US, which is really struggling, is only testing about doing 313 tests per million people, whereas countries like South Korea, which have done quite well in controlling the outbreak, are doing 6,000 tests per million people. And in Australia, we've done a lot of tests close to the South Korea mark. So maintaining social distancing, keeping the borders closed at the moment, and test, test, test will be very important. And it's really important for the public to cooperate with the government in this.
Doctor, with the stats and figures so far as of now globally, is it a favorable or an unfavorable situation that is prevailing in the world?
That's very hard to say because some parts of the world are better than others. So here in Australia, for instance, we're at the moment seeing a small downturn in the number of cases. Now, it may be too early to say if that's going to be sustained, but we're hoping it will be in the context of a lot of testing and the social isolation measures that we've taken. But The United States, for example, seems to be in dire straits. They've almost registered 200,000 cases, and places like New York are struggling to identify sick people and treat sick people. So it is varying in different parts of the world. So I think we will find that over the next few weeks, some countries will improve, others might get worse. So it will be a heterogeneous mix of patterns that we'll see.
Doctor, we received the news, we saw the news that a large supply of medicine is on the way to Australia as well, as a way to curb the virus. Yesterday, Japan donated 5,000 pills of Avigan to Sri Lanka now, but there are no talks of a permanent cure for this virus, a vaccine, nothing as of yet. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so what I would really love to see is a vaccine that that you and I can have, and we can take our families to the doctors to have. But that's looking like it'll be about 12 months away. It's not that the vaccines aren't physically there, but they have to undergo testing to see if they're safe and if they actually work. But I think that's the most likely factor that's going to curb this outbreak. In terms of medicines to treat people who are sick with the virus, there are no approved medicines that work for this virus. There are speculative medicines, such as a malaria medicine, chloroquine, and its relation hydroxychloroquine, which in the laboratory setting have some antiviral effects, and in a study or two may have had some impacts. And they are being used in clinical trials, certainly here in Australia and in other parts of the world. There is a drug developed for Ebola called remdesivir, for which there are trials going on in at least China and America, which again seems to be showing some promise, but it's hard to know when that will be widely available.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That was Dr. Sanjay Sena Naik joining us all the way from Canberra, Australia. And the World Health Organization has praised Sri Lanka for its efforts taken to eradicate COVID-19. That are the efforts of you and I have taken as a nation. So therefore, stay home, stay safe, and remember, even though you are alone, we are with you. This is News First.
Main sponsor.
A very good evening to you and welcome. Joining us this evening is Dr. Kapila Jayaratna, representing the College of Community Physicians. A very good evening to you and welcome, Dr. Jayaratna. Starting off, we've seen SARS, Ebola, Zika, MERS wreaking havoc the world over. Why is COVID-19 different compared to these epidemics? What makes coronavirus different?
It's mainly the infectivity, the number of people infected due to the virus. Now, if you take MERS, is only 2,500 cases we saw, and the SARS only 770 odd cases. But Ebola, 11,000 deaths. So here, Corona, the number of cases we see out of one infected patient is very high, but the case fatality, the proportion of patients who will die of this disease is less than 4%. Now, if you take the number of patients who will get persons who will get infected out of this corona is 2.5. So if there is nothing there, within 30 days you will see 406 people will get infected.
Now, Dr. Jayaratna, let's talk about the information that is coming out on corona that is getting people confused. There are conflicting ideas online. The horrible byproduct of having social media is everyone is an expert and everyone has an opinion on everything. Now, this may be very basic for you, Dr. Jayaratne, but how can we catch corona? And what must we be most concerned about when it comes to social distancing?
Yeah, I mean, so far the evidence is now if you are in close proximity, so within 6 feet with a person, you can get the disease. But it's basically respiratory droplets. So if you inhale, if a person has cough, sneezing, then there is a high chance of getting the virus in. And the other mechanism is there will be contaminated surfaces like the table, the other places, the doors. I mean, from the contaminated surfaces, you can catch the disease. So, I mean, basically, it's again that is why we advocate hand washing. So you will touch these places and you will touch your face or nose, then it's a high chance the virus can get into your respiratory system.
Now, how is the public health pandemic response in Sri Lanka? Because we saw 20 cases being reported yesterday alone, Dr. Jayaratne. So have we done it right in terms of fighting COVID-19?
Yeah, actually it has to be appreciated. The government, it's called epidemic response, public health response to this epidemic. So what we adopted is a whole of government, whole of society approach. Now if you look at this our approach, so even without a single case of death, so we started employing many strategies. Now say the closure of schools, so and the dedicated hospitals. Then we started with screening travelers from the countries coming into. So there was a travel ban, and we have introduced the management guidelines. So the system is health system was well prepared. Then the most important thing is the contact tracing. So if there is a suspected case, then we will the whole system is in operation to catch or trace these contacts, and they were kept under surveillance, and some people were self quarantined. So now you know the number of cases, that's only number of cases, few number of cases. Now we employed these interventions far ahead of other. I mean, when you look at the other countries, we are more early.
Dr. Jayaratne, now reinfection and immunity. Now 21 have recovered so far in Sri Lanka, and the number of those who are recovering from COVID-19 is increasing the world over. Does this mean, Dr. Jayaratne, that the individuals who have recovered are immune to the virus, and there is no chance of reinfection and retransmitting this to someone else?
We can't say it exactly, because the evidence coming from China say, there is an element of reinfection even to the people who got the disease. But since this is a virus disease, so there is an immunity developed. In China, they use this plasma of these patients to treat or to develop improve the immune system of the patients. So you can't exactly say that once you get the disease, you won't get the disease again.
So there are approximately around 135,000 to 140,000 people who die every year in Sri Lanka owing to various diseases. Now, have we neglected them? And are we now completely focusing our attention on COVID-19? And what are the repercussions of that Dr. Jayaratna?
Yeah, actually, that is what the College of Community Physicians of Sri Lanka is. 2 days before we release a media communique stating our stance on the current epidemic and what we have as a country done so far based on public health principles. The one item we want to draw the attention is these non-COVID patients. So there are a lot of millions of people who get admitted and get inward care. So we have to care for them. So there is a planned, organized system to care for these people. Now, for example, we have 360,000 pregnant women in the country in 1 year. Now, in a given time, now at this moment, there are 200,000 pregnant women. So we have arranged all the care for them. Now, say all the ground level, our MOHs, medical officers of health, they are conducting antenatal clinics. And so we have mechanisms to care for the non-COVID patients.
Dr. Jayaratna, what is your warning to the general public when it comes to COVID-19 or coronavirus? What do you have to tell the general public? Must they know about the disease and the virus spreading?
We should. We cannot be complacent because you saw yesterday we had 20 cases reported. You never know because at present I think we are in the stage of 3A or 3B because it's either family clustering or at village cluster level.
Okay.
So somehow we have to prevent.
So what I don't understand, Dr. Jayaratna, right now is that we were on a partial lockdown now for 17 days in Sri Lanka. So the quarantine period stands at 14 days. Now the number of cases are increasing after these 17 days are over. Now this is quite alarming, isn't it?
Yes, but this there may be cases moving within the community, but still we don't have the evidence that there is a community transmission going on.
The problem right now in Sri Lanka is the stigma surrounding COVID-19, isn't it?
Yeah.
People fear that if they come out and say that they are a COVID-19 patient, there'll be stigma surrounding their name, their families, and even the places that they're staying. So this is the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, actually now this is one big area we want to focus on, the College of Community Physicians. We are focusing on that. We have to dilute this stigma.
One of the reasons is, Dr. Jayaratna, we saw that the patient or the patient who was detected in Akurna, his van was burnt by the villagers. So there is a problem at large in the community about COVID-19 at present.
Yeah, we have to start this from the healthcare personnel, from their perspective also. We should not, disseminate or divulge these identities of these people because if we continue, I saw several media highlighting the various aspects of these patients' identities. It's not healthy, and it's not ethical also because it will have bad repercussions on case detection. The real cases may not come up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kapila Jayaratna, representing the College of Community Physicians, for joining us this evening on the News Bulletin. Fear has two meanings: forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. The choice is yours.
Moving on now, an island-wide Pirik chanting event was organized to bless the country and its citizens in light of COVID-19 outbreak in Sri Lanka. One such event is currently being held at the Hunupitiya Gangarame temple in Colombo.
group, including United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe, met with the President and the Prime Minister this afternoon.
The meeting had taken place at the Presidential Secretariat for 3 hours. Basil Rajapaksa, Wimal Weerawansa, Dala Salaha Peruma and Dinesh Gunawardena were among the others who attended the meeting. UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe was joined by Ravi Karunanayaka, Arjuna Ranatunga, Naveen Disanayaka, Daya Gamage, Palita Range Bandara, Lakshmanu and
President UNP meetings dropped.
There is a problem concerning our supply chain. We should look into resolving the problems faced by those who earn daily wages. There is a problem pertaining to medicine. There are several people who are self-employed. How can we encourage them? The government put forth their stance while we explained the stand of the UNP. We were shown that a plan has been implemented for 5.3 million self-employed individuals. The government and the UNP have prepared a joint statement that will be revealed to you in the near future.
එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂයත් අපි ජොයින්ට් ස්ටේට්මන්ට් එකක් ඉදිරිපත් කරා ඒක වැඩි කල්යන් ඉස්සලා ඔබතුමාලට ඒක ප්‍රසිද්ධ කරනවා දේශපාලන
They appreciated the government's work plan instead of looking at it through a political lens. They expressed their views regarding the hardships faced at present. Former Minister Basil Rajapaksa explained the steps undertaken by the Presidential Task Force to restore the situation in the country back to normalcy. He pointed out that arrangements have been made to provide 5.3 million families with an allowance of 5,000 rupees by the 9th of next month.
The Presidential Secretariat issued a statement regarding the meeting involving members of the government and the UNP today. The statement said that both factions had agreed that the work plan to minimize the impact of the coronavirus should be done without affecting the public and also in an unbiased manner. In more news, leader of the Samagi Jana Balavegaya Sajith Premadasa expressed the following views with regard to the government's program in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
On the 30th of March, the government decided to provide dry rations and financial support to the underprivileged and those who have been severely inconvenienced due to the prevailing situation in the country. We thank the present government for this. According to the data presented in 2020 by the Statistics Department, an individual requires an income of 5,020 rupees to survive for a period of 1 month. Accordingly, a family of 4 will require 20,080 rupees for a month. I kindly request the government to consider the well-being of families and to arrange the necessary provisions to provide families with 20,080 rupees. Further, it has been announced that essential items will be provided at concessionary rates. However, based on the reports we received from every corner, the program to distribute food and dry rations is not taking place properly. I put forward these opinions and proposals with the intention of increasing the efficiency of services that are rendered by the government to the general public and not with the intention of criticizing the government.
Meanwhile, the JVP says that a common program must be established in order to overcome the prevailing crisis situation in the country.
We urge the government to establish a common program where food and essential items will be distributed to every household in an unbiased manner. It is wrong if a political faction attempts to take advantage during a period of crisis, targeting an election. Basil Rajapaksa is not an MP or a minister and does not hold any significant state position. He is the leader of a political party. Handing over a fund to such an individual while a general election is expected in the future goes against the transparency and ethics of the government.
Following are the views expressed by attorney at law Maitri Gunaratna at a media briefing convened in Habaradu.
No proper mechanism is followed by the government. There are about 10 state officials in one Grama Niladhari division. The government is perfectly capable of supplying essential goods to the people by using these state officials, voluntary organizations, the cooperative groups and all the other organizations in the village. But what is the government doing? Now they have brought another brother to the equation, Basil Rajapaksa. Instead of working on a national level at a time of a national disaster, what is the government doing right now? They are engaging in nepotism. By now, it is the members of the government who are taking steps to distribute these items. Former Prime Minister warned us that a pandemic such as this will make its way to our country. The government did not prepare for this. The only thing this government wanted was to hold the general election and obtain two-thirds in the parliament. It was due to that emergency that a room for this virus to spread was created. If the government is trying to take political advantages even at this time, when the opposition is assisting them, we condemn this entirely. This shouldn't be happening.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa requested international financial institutions to provide concessions to countries like Sri Lanka. The president had made this request during a phone conversation with the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom.
On the conversations they had yesterday, the Director General of the World Health Organization had thanked the President for the efforts of Sri Lanka to combat the coronavirus. The Director General also added that the spread of the virus in the South Asian region had posed a serious threat to both the health sector and the economic sector in the region. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had made a request for attention to be focused on providing concessions to developing nations like Sri Lanka, whose economy heavily depend on foreign investments in the stock market, income from expatriates and foreign loans. The President had requested the Director General of the World Health Organization to discuss with the Administrative Director of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Chairman of the Asian Development Bank and leaders of developed nations to either suspend the loans provided or restructure them. Meanwhile, the President met with heads of the central bank yesterday. Attention was focused on the steps taken by the central bank to maintain a monetary supply and provision of financial facilities during the COVID-19 outbreak. The President had instructed the heads of the central bank to take steps to ensure that the trust is maintained during the issuance of sovereign bonds. The President also instructed them to keep banks open during the period and formulate fiscal policy for the post-COVID-19 period. Meanwhile, the government reiterated that travel between districts has been completely forbidden except for the provision of essential services. The Presidential Secretariat stated that strict legal action will be taken against those who misuse the procedure set in place to ensure that essential services continue uninterrupted. The mechanism to deliver essential food items to houses will also continue. The communique issued by the Presidential Secretariat added that farmers and cultivators of small tea estates and export crops can continue to engage in these activities. The Presidential Secretariat also requests the general public to adhere to all of the advice and guidelines prescribed by the government to control the spread of the coronavirus.
Attorney General Dapula de Oliveira has urged the Chief Justice to consider cancelling High Court sittings scheduled for April 2nd and the 3rd, citing incidents of COVID-19 is on the rise in the country. In a letter sent to Chief Justice Jayantha Jayasuriya, the Attorney General said considering the government's health warnings and repeated consistent medical advices on social distancing, it would be most undesirable to expose officials of the court, lawyers, State Council, the police and judges to participate and appear in court proceedings. De Oliveira also said that most of the court proceedings are due to take place to consider High Court bail applications, mostly in serious drug cases, which at the moment stands over 100, where lawyers have filed motions for these matters to be taken up in court in the next 2 days, which fall outside the decision of the committee appointed by the President. Moving on now, the curfew in 19 districts, which was lifted today, was reimposed at 2 p.m. today. Residents of these areas flocked to their respective towns to purchase essential goods.
Our correspondent stated that the number of people who arrived in the Bibile town to purchase goods was comparatively lower to the other days. Only a few people had come to the town, although stores and banks were kept open when the curfew was lifted. While stores were kept open in Mathura, the number of people who visited the shops were also comparatively low to other days on which the curfew was lifted. However, our correspondent said that long queues were witnessed outside groceries to purchase rice. Only few people visited stores in Hambantota as well when the curfew was lifted this morning. Our correspondent stated that the residents of this area had been affected as public transport had not operated to and from the villages in the district. Our correspondent stated that long queues were witnessed in Kurunagala today. The number of vehicles entering the district had been restricted. Heavy police presence was witnessed when the curfew was lifted. The number of people who came to the Polonnaruwa town was also low when compared to other days on which the curfew was lifted. Long queues were seen outside agriculture stores when the curfew was lifted in the Valimada area today. Our correspondent said that only a few people were seen in the Anuradhapura town today as well.
However, curfew in the Colombo, Gampaha, Kalutara, Putlam, Kandy and Jaffna districts will continue to be in effect under further notice.
With the imposition of curfew, all transport activities between districts except for essential services is prohibited. The police had placed barricades on the road in several areas during curfew hours. Officers attached to the police special task force were also a part in this endeavour. Our correspondent said cleaning activities within the Colombo district were underway today. This is how the town of Gampaha looked today, with several shops and businesses being closed due to the curfew restrictions. Our correspondent said all individuals travelling during curfew hours were checked. This is how the town of Kalutara looked today, with the curfew still being in effect in the area.
Sri Lankan Airlines had temporarily suspended its flights from 8th of April 2020 to the 21st of April. Sri Lankan Airlines announced that the decision was reached following travel restrictions imposed by the destinations. Police spokesperson has announced that those who obstruct government employees to work and those who publish such videos to the internet and social media during coronavirus relief efforts will be arrested. Meanwhile, pharmacies across the island will be opened on the 2nd, 3rd and the 6th of April for pensioners to purchase medicine. They can produce their pension card as a curfew pass to purchase these medicine. Moving on now, former MP Palitha Tevara Peruma has once again become a figure who is being much talked about in the society.
The former parliamentarian addressed the media opposite the presidential secretariat while returning after purchasing goods from the Manning market in order to provide food for the people. Ask them to let me control Sataso or even the entire country for just a month. Today they have become the army that spun the top in the sand. There is no proper program. Ask them to hand it over to me. I will balance all of it. Ask the president to hand it over to me. I have dried fish here. This is for the people in the villages. This is only the spices. Rice has not been brought yet. I will purchase everything from my own wealth, unlike Gam and Pilla who collected 100 rupees each. I started this by pawning my vehicle and I will carry on this task till I die.
While global attention is directed towards eradicating COVID-19, Japan has started clinical tests on its antiviral drug named Avigan. The clinical tests aim to find whether its antiviral drug could be used for treating those who have contracted COVID-19.
The company which manufactures the Avigan tablet has begun the clinical trials on the effectiveness of this medicine, as they expect for clinical tests to be completed by June this year. Currently, the Avigan tablet has been prescribed to 100 patients who had tested positive to COVID-19 as part of the clinical trial. Avigan was first introduced 6 years ago as an antiviral drug that would help treat those who had contracted the influenza. Japanese media have said that the prescription of Avigan may lead to harmful side effects and added that the pill could only be provided through a state-approved pharmacy. Chinese researchers have shown that patients who were administered with Avigan have shown an increase in lung strength and lung activity after the medicine was administered. The Secretary General of the World Health Organization, Antonio Guterres, said that this pandemic is the most challenging crisis faced since World War II. He also added that the world will have to face a never-seen-before scale of economic downfall as an after-effect of this global pandemic.
The government will ink an agreement with the World Bank on Friday to obtain a loan worth $127 million to support its efforts in combating COVID-19. Treasury Secretary S.R. Artigala said today, days after the government failed to raise $220 million development bond.
Treasury Secretary S.R. Artigala told Newsfirst that the government has received $500 million of the $1.2 billion loan it got from the China Development Bank, and the remaining $700 million tranche is expected soon. Artigala also said the government will not default its external debt repayment, but instead would seek a moratorium from lenders owing to the current economic impact caused by COVID-19 pandemic.
The United States of America is currently the epicenter of COVID-19, with the number of cases at 188,748 and 6 new deaths, bringing the total deaths to 465. I beg your pardon, 4,065. New York remains the worst affected state with 75,983 cases and 1,714 as of today. President Donald Trump expressed the following views today.
US President Donald Trump warned Americans that they have a very tough 2 weeks coming in the fight against the coronavirus, as he urged everyone to follow federal social distancing guidelines through the end of April.
It's a matter of life and death, frankly. It's a matter of life and death. We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks, and then hopefully you're going to start seeing some real life together, and we're all going to get together, and we're going to see what we can do, because you don't want to lose an industry. You're going to lose an industry over it. Thousands and thousands of jobs.
US President Donald Trump also urged Florida officials to open an Atlantic coast port to a Dutch cruise ship stuck at sea with a deadly coronavirus outbreak on board, urging the governor to drop his opposition. The remarks contrast with his response in February to a different cruise ship, the Grand Princess, which he said should remain at sea instead of coming into port in California. Meanwhile, a Russian military transport plane took off from an airfield outside Moscow early today and headed for the United States with a load of medical equipment and masks to help Washington fight coronavirus. President Vladimir Putin offered Russian help in a phone conversation with President Donald Trump when the two leaders discussed how best to respond to the virus.
Fake news has suffocated the internet ever since the outbreak of the coronavirus. We are now joined by Dasuni Ataud of Newsfirst for today's edition of the Mythbusters.
There was a message that was being circulating stating that the World Health Organization has issued a message asking that people do not consume bakery products as it is not washable and can get infected to the virus easily. However, the World Health Organization has not issued any statement against the consumption of bakery products. There was also a message stating that those with A positive blood group will not be affected by the virus. However, that has not been proven yet. There was also a message being circulated that inhaling hot water steam could be effective against killing COVID-19 virus. There is no scientific evidence to prove that inhaling hot water steam can kill this virus. There was also a video believed to have originated from the University of Queensland in Australia stating that consuming bananas will help us avoid being infected. However, the University of Queensland has denied any relationship between bananas and coronavirus. This video has been created by merging 2 separate videos from ABC Australia and Wall Street Journal. There was a message stating that the late Dr. Li Wei-Liang, who identified the coronavirus, has prescribed tea as a cure for the virus and that China has been using tea to cure its people. However, medical experts have pointed out that it is false.
Transparency International Sri Lanka has called for the release of certain documents concerning the decision to pardon and release a soldier convicted of the Mirisuville massacre late last month.
Transparency International Sri Lanka pointed out that the law requires a report from the judge who tried the case, the advice of the Attorney General concerning the report, and the recommendations of the Justice Minister to pardon a death row prisoner. The statement, referring to the Right to Information Act, noted that all public authorities should disclose decisions that particularly affect the public, along with the data and documents used to make such decisions. Accordingly, the anti-corruption body called on the Presidential Secretariat to disclose the report of the trial judge, the advice of the Attorney General, and the recommendations of the Justice Minister.
And that is a wrap of Primetime News on TV1. I'm Tarushi Kumar Singh along with today's interpreter Brian D. Cruz. Have a good night.